Welcome, friends, to Finance Working Mama. My name is Heather, and thank you for joining me today. I thought I would share with you a passion of mine. I did mention my first video, I have two very important passions, one being my career in finance, but most importantly, being a mama to my two girls and a wife to my husband. And one of the ways I try to show them how much I love them and to take care of them, I love to create recipes and I love to cook for them. So I thought it would be fun to share with you three of my own recipes that I did the fourth week of January's meal plan. I hope you guys enjoy it and maybe inspire you to create something for your family or give you additional ideas for future meal planning. Thank you guys, and I hope you enjoy. I'm excited to share with you my chili recipe that I've created over the course of, 15-20 years. As you can see, I'm putting about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in the bottom of a pan. And you will need 2 pounds of ground meat. You could use whatever ground meat you like, your family likes, or whatever you have in the freezer. Most importantly, whatever you find on sale. Now, I have done pork, a pound of pork, a pound of beef. I've done a pound of beef, a pound of turkey. My favorite is a pound of beef and a pound of pork spicy sausage. That really is delicious. But today I chose 93% lean ground beef. And as you can see, it's still a little frozen as I'm breaking it up in the pot. I chose a leaner beef today because we're trying to cut back on our fat and cholesterol. Would have loved to found 96%, but could not find that in the freezer. So 93 it is. I also put in about 2 to 3 cloves of garlic. Today I used the minced garlic that you get in the jars. Pure convenience. It was at the reach of my hand when I was in the refrigerator before I started this video. I used my little handy dandy meat masher, as you can see. This tool, for the longest time, I would not purchase because I thought, why in the world do I need a tool to mash up meat? And I was at a party and finally broke down and bought one. And I have to say, I don't know how I've lived in this world without this tool in the kitchen. It does make this job so much easier and faster, and I use it for a lot of other things, surprisingly. So it was definitely worth the investment. And if you don't have one and you're thinking about it, jump on board. You'll enjoy it. I believe you can find them at Dollar Tree for like half the price that I paid for mine. And of course, I'm sure Amazon has it as well. Let's talk about spices. Now, I'm the traditional cook. I put the spices in the palm of my hand and look at it and say, oh, yep, that looks good. Throw it in the pot. But for today's purposes, I did still put it in the palm of my hand, but then I put the amount that I had in my hand into a measuring spoon so I can provide you with more exact measurements for each spice. So this is what I have put in today. I did 2 tablespoons of chili powder. It's more like 2 heaping spoons of chili powder. 1.5 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1/4 of a teaspoon of red pepper, and then 2 teaspoons of garlic salt. Now, if you don't have garlic salt, because sometimes I don't either, then I will just do a teaspoon of salt and then like a teaspoon of garlic powder. I like to put the spices in right before the meat gets brown, just when it's pink. I feel like that makes the dish taste better when the meat has more of the flavor of the spices in it. Now I'm adding the veggies. I use 1 chopped large onion. You can use whatever onion you have on hand. 1 green bell pepper. And then I put 1 jalapeno pepper in there. I do remove the seeds of the jalapeno as well as the veins. As you know, that is where most of the heat comes from with the jalapeno. Now, jalapenos are like wild cards. They can be really hot and they can be really mild. I tasted my jalapeno today. It was right there in the middle. It was a good spicy flavor, so I was really happy with it. For years, I never added a jalapeno pepper in it. I wasn't that much into spice, but after I was pregnant with my daughter, my oldest daughter, Ava, during my pregnancy, I really craved spicy food. And then after I had her, that craving never went away. So I started putting in a jalapeno in the chili, and that just made a great addition to my recipe. Now, my husband loved the new addition because he really enjoys spicy food, especially a spicy chili. So if you're not really into spicy food, don't add the jalapeno. If you are, add more if you wish, or increase the red pepper. I'm sure you know. Now let's talk about tomato products. I am putting in 1 can of diced tomatoes. That's probably what, a 14.5 or 15 ounce can. I really prefer to use petite diced tomatoes, but I didn't have it in the pantry. And I don't know about you guys, but I find it sometimes hard to find petite diced tomatoes. And when I do, I buy a lot of them because I actually prefer the petite tomatoes in my dishes versus the larger chunks. And I am going to put about an 8-ounce can of tomato sauce, just an 8-ounce can. Some people put more in their chili. I find the combination between the 1 can of diced tomatoes and an 8-ounce can of tomato sauce the perfect amount of tomato product in my chili. Now, I'm also going to add 2 cups of water. I'm going to add hot water. I don't like adding cold water to any pot that I'm cooking in because I don't want the temperature to go down. So I add 2 warm or hot cups of water to this dish. Also, let's talk about beans. I do not like beans, y'all. I just really do not. And the one bean I cannot stand is black beans. I feel like they taste like pellets. I don't care how long you cook them or what you do to them, they taste like pellets. But I do compromise. I will eat pinto beans. I do like them. Of all the beans, I will eat pinto beans. I will only put 1 can of pinto beans in my chili. 1 can. Y'all are probably going, what? But that's what I do. Now, as you see, these are not pinto beans. These are red kidney beans. I did not have pinto beans in my pantry. I only had 1 can of red kidney beans in my pantry. So I chose just to put that 1 can in my chili beans today. My husband will be happy because I think he prefers kidney beans over the pinto beans. He likes beans, so I think if I added another can, he'd be happy with more beans. Now, I guess you can add 2 cans or 3 cans. I think if you add 4 cans, that's just crazy. That's just too many beans. Ugh. But if you're not a meat eater, obviously beans would be important to this particular dish. The last thing that I put in is hot sauce. Now you see Tabasco right there because it's the only thing I have in the refrigerator. I prefer North Carolina born Texas Pete. It is made in North Carolina, about 25 minutes from where I live in High Point. But I ran out of it, out of my fridge, and so I used what I had available, which was Tabasco. I do about 2 or 3 nice size douses in there. It's completely up to you on how hot you like your chili. You can add more or add less. Now I cover it just a tad. As you can see, I leave a little bit of an opening. I like to cook it for 30 minutes, but I really enjoy cooking it for an hour. What goes better with homemade chili? Well, that's homemade cornbread. Thought I'd share with you my recipe. It's actually not my recipe. It is my Mimi's recipe. She would make this and she would not use 1 single measuring spoon or measuring cup. So I watched her for years make it, and I remember her always saying there is a certain way you got to make a cornbread, and I'm going to show you that process. It was just important. And you know what? I've not veered away from it because it didn't question it, because it was the way Mimi did it. And I'm going to show you how Mimi did it. So I am adding 2 eggs to my bowl. And I will also add 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil. Now, my grandmother always used vegetable oil. I think a time or two she used canola oil, but I think you could use whatever oil you like in your baking, but I'm sticking to vegetable because that is what Mimi used for the vast majority of times that I watched her make cornbread. This is the other piece that she said this is so important. You want to make sure you mix your oil and your eggs really, really well to where it looks creamy. To make sure every piece of that egg is broken up and incorporated into that oil before adding anything else to your bowl. I'm adding 1 1/4 cup of milk to this mixture, and I'm using 2% milk. Now, my grandmother used whole milk, but we don't have whole milk in the fridge, so I'm going to use what we have, and I don't really think it makes too much difference. I haven't noticed a difference in the texture or taste of the cornbread, so if you have 2%, that works well. If you have whole, maybe even better. I make sure that the milk is incorporated into the eggs and the oil before I add the baking powder. I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder. You might say that seems like a lot. Maybe it is, but that is what my grandmother did. I did a teaspoon to try to get the measurements right, and the teaspoon, the taste and the texture didn't come out like hers, so I chose a tablespoon and it came out just like hers. So it is a tablespoon of baking powder, and I also put a teaspoon of salt. Make sure those ingredients are incorporated really well in the mixture before I add my next one, and that is going to be a tablespoon of sugar. Now you're probably going to look at it and say your sugar looks a little strange. I like to use raw sugar in a lot of my baking. I just think it tastes better than the white plain sugar. Now, my grandmother said she put sugar in her mixture, not to make it sweet, but to really tone down the taste of the baking powder. You know what? I've never not used sugar, so that's what Grandma did. So I'm going to use sugar in this recipe to make sure that you don't taste the baking powder. And then I add 1 cup of all-purpose flour to the mixture. And again, it is important to make sure every bit of that flour is incorporated into the mixture before adding the last ingredient and the most important ingredient that makes this cornbread, and that is 100% cornmeal, 100% cornmeal, and I'm putting a cup in there. I'm using House of Autry. That is a company that is from my neck of the woods. I grew up in eastern North Carolina, and my grandmother liked using them. And I can find it in a local store here in the Triad area. Now I make sure that's all together. Again, it's so important to make sure that there's no lumps in it. Mix it really well. Take your time to do this because it just makes it so good, so fluffy, so delicious. Now, everyone, I would love to know what vessel you put your cornbread in. Obviously, an iron skillet is the best. And I have found this one particular vessel that I use that makes it even better. But this is the important piece. You want to get your oven at 425 degrees. Whatever pan you use, you want to make sure you put oil at the bottom, covering the whole bottom of your pan. And then put it in the oven and get it nice and hot. This is so important. Nice and hot. With this particular one, I did put oil on the bottom of each little pie slice. I love this particular way of cooking it because I love the crunchy pieces around the cornbread. That's my favorite part. And then you have the soft, moist inside of the cornbread. It's sort of like the perfect marriage of cornbread, the crunchy and softness all in one. And this particular pan provides that. It provides that perfect crisp inside. As you can see, I'm slowly putting the batter in each little vessel to not make a mess. And I probably leave maybe like an eighth or a fourth room at the top because this is going to rise. It's going to really do a great job of puffing up, and it's probably because of all that baking powder I put in it. But guys, I'm telling you, it is a delicious cornbread recipe. My grandmother would not lead you wrong in this. I will put it in the oven at 425 degrees, and in my oven it takes about 19 minutes. So I would suggest putting in 19 minutes and then checking on it. Use a toothpick to make sure that it's completely done. It has taken me, depending on the oven I've used, between 19 or 25 minutes. Look at there, there's my chili. It's been on there for about an hour, and it's ready to eat. Who is ready to learn how to cook short ribs in the crock pot? Well, I'm here to share with you my recipe. I first like to start with a very hot pan. As you can see, I have about 4 tablespoons of olive oil. You could choose to use whatever olive oil you like. As the pot is getting nice and hot, I take the ribs, wash them really well, pat them dry, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder them really well. Then I dredge them in some flour. Now, the reason why I think it's so important to sear the meat before the slow cooking process is because it just seals in all the wonderful flavors that short rib has. I like to flour it because it helps with the searing process and getting it nice and brown. And it holds in those spices that you put on the raw meat before dredging it in the flour. And what flour is left in the pan after the searing process will help develop a delicious gravy at the end. Now, this is the part that takes some patience. It is so very important to put your meat in one at a time, making sure you space them correctly. It's important not to crowd the pan. You don't want it to boil, you want it to sear. Overcrowding the pan can create too much juice, which will allow issues of searing. Now, I unfortunately have some pretty skimpy short ribs for whatever reason. Typically, they are pretty thick and very large, and it takes me usually 3 at a time. These are small, as you can see. It gives you a little bit of perspective of how big they are. All of them fit perfectly in the pan without crowding. Now, as you can see a little bit of the brown in there. Now, the first sear always takes the longest, unfortunately, because you're putting cold or cool meat into a hot pan. So that brings the pan down, the temperature of the pan down. The second round of searing, when you flip it over, it takes less time because the meat is already warmed up, and it should take probably half the amount of time. The first sear for me took about 6 to 7 minutes, and the second sear was less. It was close to 3 to 4. Again, be patient. Allow that meat to be nice and brown on all the sides. Be patient. Now, once all the sides are seared, oh, there's those little hands. Those are my babies. They're saying hello. They're so sweet. So, as you can see, they're browning really well. And I'm going to take the time to do all the sides of the meat since they're pretty substantial and they can stand up on all the sides. Look at that, nice and brown. Delicious. I'm going to take all the ribs out of the pot, and as you can see the brown beigey liquid at the bottom. That is the oil, some of the fat from the ribs that has reside, as well as the flour and some of the spices. This is so important. Again, this helps develop a great gravy. Now I am putting into the pan about 2 stalks of celery. I had 3 skinny carrots, or actually 4 skinny carrots, so that's about 4 carrots, and 1 chopped onion. You can put as much or as little vegetables as you like in there. If you have leeks, that's a great one. Some people put parsnips in it. Whatever root vegetables that you enjoy, perfect for this dish. I like to pepper it again, and then I take the spoon and zhuzh it all around. Make sure it's good and mixed into that olive oil and pepper and flour mixture that was at the bottom of that pan. I also like to put about a teaspoon of thyme leaves. These are dry thyme leaves. If I had them, which I wish I did, about 4 sprigs of thyme would be perfect for this dish. Fresh thyme. But I don't have fresh thyme, so I'm sticking with the dried thyme today. And I like to do about a teaspoon of crushed rosemary. If I had fresh rosemary, I would have preferred, I would put about 3 to 4 stems of rosemary in there. I'm putting 2 teaspoons of garlic. That's about 3 to 4 medium-sized garlic cloves. Mix that all well together. And then I add what I call sort of like my favorite ingredient that really sets the dish over the top, and that is red wine. Now I'm going to put about 1.5 cups of red wine into this dish. Now if I had much bigger beef ribs, I would actually use a whole bottle of wine at this point. And don't worry, all the alcohol cooks out in a period of 6 to 7 hours. Then I put in about 2 cups of beef broth. Again, you might need more beef broth if you have bigger ribs, because what I like to do is to make sure that my ribs are almost covered at the top. After I get it all mixed in together, well, I then put my ribs back into the pot, make sure they're fully stabled in there and on the flat surface of the pot, the bottom of the pan. And it is important, once you have all your ribs back in the pan, you have enough liquid that it goes up to the tippy top of the ribs, not fully covering, but almost covering all the ribs. You get it nice and simmering. As you can see, I'm getting it bubbling really well before I put that top on. But there we go, that's the perfect amount of simmer. I'm going to make sure once more that all my ribs are covered. And at this point, I'm going to cover my pot, turn it down to low, and cook it for 7 hours. Okay, y'all, that is all that I have to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed the 3 recipes that I shared with you. Give me a thumbs up if you did. But most importantly, in the comments below, let me know which one you like the most or which one you think you'll try in your family next. And as always, thank you so much for your time and joining me here at Finance Working Mama. Until next time, y'all.